And we are live, part two, the continuation, the sequel, all of the things. I am Eric Lindquist. Welcome to the MLB DFS Strategy Show here at Awesemo.com, presented by One Odd Shopper. I'm, again, Eric Lindquist. That's Adam Scherer over there. How you doing, my dude?
Doing pretty good. Really excited to see how this show goes with you drinking coffee, because you already sound like a coked out coffee addict on most shows. And then now you're actually drinking coffee.
This is just the way that I am in real life. I have a very lucky fiance, I would say. Then my coffee maker just decided to crap out on me. And so that was not enjoyable. Not on Tyler. For once, it was not Tyler's fault. It was 100% my fault, taking the blame. But you know what I can do? I can talk really fast, and I know you can too.
Yeah, that is one thing that comes naturally to me.
All right, let's rock. We are going to get right to it here. Thank you so much for everybody hanging with us here. As you're starting to come in, hit that like button, subscribe button, notification bell. All of that goes such a long way for us. And again, we restarted the stream. Sorry about the technical difficulties, but again, we've got up till 9:15. If we go maybe 5 minutes over, that's fine. But we've got an hour. We've got 14 games. We're going to roll. So New York Mets plus 100 at Philadelphia, 9.5 total runs. We talked a little bit about it on the last stream, but I think we should address it here so that we have everything kind of in congruence put together here. But on one side, Marcus Stroman, 9K, Kyle Gibson, 7.4K over on DraftKings. Neither one are that enticing of real-life pitchers. I would say on FanDuel, maybe 8.6K Marcus Stroman, just because of the quality start, but 9K for Kyle Gibson over there, probably a pass. I know you're not as high on either one of them. Marcus Stroman, I'm never high on. Kyle Gibson, the ownership's there. How are you handling pitching in this game?
Probably not going too crasy with it. The price tag at 9K on Stroman is just difficult to get to. There's not a ton of great pitching on this slate, so you can certainly, make a case for just rostering a good real life pitcher like Stroman, but he's priced, I think, higher than he should be given the strikeout numbers he has. Kyle Gibson's $7,400 salary is the more appealing of the two, but you are getting ownership there as well. He's getting the most ownership of anyone in his price range. It's, I think, a pretty middle of the road matchup against the Mets. He also doesn't get many strikeouts. He does do a good job of limiting power, but that's something that you could see, the power numbers get a little bit worse pitching his home games in Philadelphia now as well. So I would expect, the way things look right now, to get around the field on Gibson, just because he is inexpensive, but not really at an ownership number at 17% that I want to just be jamming over the field. On Stroman, I wouldn't expect to get much, just because there are some other top end options I think look better.
Agreed. And so bats in this game, New York Mets coming in with the most leverage here in our first run of ownership, 4.8% top stack potential. That's right about middle of the road here on this slate. But then coming in with only 1% ownership, if that holds true, that's going to be a team I get to quite a bit. How about you?
Yeah, the way things look right now, I would have, like, in 150 max, just knowing how my lineups end up being made, I would probably end up with a crazy amount of Mets, especially for a 14-game slate, because right now they just check all of the boxes. Like, they have the 7th highest top stack percentage on the slate. I mentioned it on the original stream, but this isn't one of those slates where you have one or two teams pulling, 15 or 20% top stack percentage like we've gotten recently with games at Coors and with the Reds last night against Will Crow. The Tampa Bay Rays have the highest top stack percentage at only 8.5%. So it's a pretty wide open slate in terms of offenses. The Mets are coming in just shy of 5%, 7th highest on the slate. So they look good in that regard. They're projected for about 1% aggregate ownership. So they look good there. And then they're facing Kyle Gibson, who is the third or fourth highest owned pitcher on the entire slate. So they also are getting leverage against a relatively popular pitcher. The way the numbers look right now, I would get to a lot of Mets because they're just checking every box.
Every single one, that is for sure. And adding Baez in there, I mean, maybe that's a couple Ks for Kyle Gibson, but it's also the potential of home runs and things that are good. On the Philly side here, a team that I've been playing a lot more of late. I feel like this week I probably played the Phillies and become more familiar with that team by the day, just because it seems like getting Didi up there in the 5-hole there for a hot second. But now you're getting Rhys Hoskins back. Travis Jankowski, once upon a time with the San Diego Padres, a little slappy hitter, put up at the top of the order here. He's 2.5K on DraftKings today. That price keeps going down. So at least it brings down the total cumulative ownership there as long as McCutchen's out, brings the stack down a little bit. I don't really want to be targeting Marcus Stroman here in this spot, but how are you handling Philadelphia?
Yeah, it just looks pretty mediocre, middle of the road to me. I mean, the Phillies are projected to go under-owned, but they have a 3% chance of being the top stack. They're getting like 1% ownership. It's not like they're in a great spot or anything like that. It won't be difficult if you're playing 150 lineups to get over 1% on Philly, but I wouldn't anticipate them being one of my top stacks because they have a relatively low chance of being the top stack. They're facing a pitcher in Stroman who isn't really getting any ownership at all. So you're not getting leverage against the field that way. I think that, individually, like Travis Jankowski at 2,500, if he ends up in some lineups, that's fine. He's leading off for a team that has an implied run total of almost 5. Harper, Real Muto, Hoskins, those guys are never an issue. But Stroman just not really a pitcher I'm looking to pick on, especially when he's not getting ownership because he's just a good real life pitcher. He has a 3.66 xFIP this year, 139 expected ISO allowed to righties, 149 to lefties. Just not a whole lot that stands out to target against Stroman.
All right. Anything else from this game?
Nope.
That's party. All right. Tampa Bay minus 145 going into Baltimore. That's always a good park upgrade for them. 10 total runs here in this one. On one side of the bump, Ryan Yarbrough, a guy who played some long relief once upon a time here for the Tampa Bay Rays. Now he's just a normal run-of-the-mill starter here. John Means on the other side. I've always kind of liked him a little bit, but 85 degrees, 50% humidity, great hitting environment, which is why you're seeing this total, border 10. And now you've got a Rays lineup that you add Nelson Cruz to. And 1 through 8, there is no give up. How are you feeling about John Means and Ryan Yarbrough here today?
Yeah, good hitting weather, good hitting park. I think Means is a good pitcher, and it is nice that we saw him in his most recent start. He threw 99 pitches against the Tigers, went 6 innings, struck out 6. We hadn't seen him have a good start. That was his third start since coming back from injury. That was the first good start that he's had. On one hand, he was facing the Tigers. On the other hand, though, it was good to see him just get out there and throw close to 100 pitches and look like himself. This is a tough matchup against the Rays, though, and then the game not being in Tropicana makes it even less appealing. Like you said, you add Nelson Cruz to this lineup. That's another right-handed power bat. You already had a Rosarena, Franco, Diaz, Margot, Zanino, all with power from the right side. The lefties here can just hit with Meadows and Brandon Lau in particular. It's a deep lineup when G-Man Choi is projected to be the number 9 hitter. That's not what you normally see. So it's a really dangerous spot for Means. I think he's a little more expensive than I would want to roll the dice on, just given how difficult I think this matchup is. And I think the Rays, do look good just because they do have so much right-handed power. It is a park upgrade for them. For the season, Means has allowed a 198 expected ISO to right-handed hitters. He has also struck out 25%, but the power numbers have been there. So I think it's a really tough spot for Means. Yarbrough on the other side at 8,100, also not getting any ownership right now on DraftKings. I think he has the better matchup between the two, but I still don't really think it's a great spot. He's, getting out of Tropicana, going into Camden Yards. And we know that this Orioles team does have right-handed power. You have Hayes, Mancini, Mountcastle, in particular, but there's probably only going to be one left-handed hitter in this lineup. For the season, Yarbrough has only struck out 17.7% of right-handed hitters. He's allowed a 161 expected ISO, which is fine. Not great, but fine. It's just kind of, if he were cheaper, if he were like 7K, I'd have some interest, but at 8,100, I think it's going to be tough to get to him here as well.
Agreed. And we briefly touched on the Tampa Bay Rays bats here, and they've got the highest top stack potential here. Ownership shares at 6%. I expect that to come up because, well, maybe not, because John Means is a good pitcher, but this just comes down to ballpark plus game environment plus temperature plus lineup. It's like a perfect storm here for the Rays, and they're not crazy in terms of Yankees on steroids right now, but the Rays, very, very serviceable. I like a Rosarena there in the one hole. It was a lot better than, I don't know. He was like batting 7th there for a second once Nelson Cruz got brought over. Huge upgrade for him. Very, very good hitter. Brandon Lau, even a 5.8K in the 7 hole. That would be a pay up to get contrarian spot if that were to be the case. Tons of homers on the season, tons of power. Probably the best hitter in the lineup. Him and Nelson Cruz 1-2 in some capacity. But how are you treating this Tampa Bay Rays team?
I really think you can just stack these guys regardless of who it is, like 1 through 9, if we get the lineup that we're expecting, because they all have power. And one thing to keep in mind too, you mentioned Brandon Lau specifically, and I was going to do the same, but John Means actually hasn't been lights out against lefties this year. He's only struck out 15.7%. It is a small sample. He's only throwing 242 pitches to lefties, but he's allowed a 203 expected ISO as well. And Brandon Lau, since the start of the 2019 season, has 256 plate appearances against left-handed pitching, 218 ISO, 305 WOBA, 196 expected ISO. So the WOBA and expected WOBA are pretty low, but he has still hit for power, which the upside's still there. And then again, if you're stacking Tampa, you're hoping to get to John Means early, get him out of the game, and then get a bunch of innings against the Baltimore bullpen, where Brandon Lau probably won't even be in lefty-lefty matchups anymore. So individually, I think, Nelson Cruz clearly the top guy here. Randy Arozarena, if he's leading off, looks really good. But when you're stacking this team, you can really just grab any 5 guys, and it's going to give you a lot of upside.
And the Baltimore side, they're cheaper. Again, going up against Yarbrough, generally a pretty decent pitcher, 2.5K Hayes. I hate that we still have to choose between Mancini and Mountcastle and DraftKings. But again, Adam, head on over to FanDuel. Play a little first base action, right?
Yeah, it's like that, and their their global swap, allowing you to pay actually more money for people. The 2 things that they actually do well. But
there you go. Give them a shout out. FanDuel, thank you so much for not your sponsorship. It's fine.
But yeah, it's Baltimore they don't look like a very good stack here. Yarbrough is a decent pitcher. Tampa Bay's pitching staff as a whole is good. I do like the salary on Austin Hayes. He'll probably get some ownership just because he is so cheap, but he's got power there. And then either one of Mancini, Mountcastle are high upside options as well.
All right, moving ourselves along here. Seattle plus 157 at New York, 10 total runs here. In this one, this New York team is going to be a headache for the rest of our lives. For sure, Marco Gonzalez is just a terrible pitcher. Wandy Peralta, I don't think that's the projected starter here right now for the Yankees. What do you kind of see from pitching here? Because it's bleak.
Yeah, I don't see too much here. Wandy Peralta's made 32 appearances this season, all out of the bullpen. Most recently, he pitched July 8th, went 1 inning through 14 pitches. Pulling up minor leagues now to see what he did there. Maybe he's a little bit more stretched out. So he hasn't pitched in the minors, according to Fangraphs at least. So not
trying to figure out who the long reliever would be. Chad Green pitched yesterday. I know that I saw that. So, I mean, he's a guy who can generally eat up a little bit more work, but I know he pitched 2 innings yesterday, 27 pitches. So there's somebody you might see that could be the person who's taking the bulk of these innings.
I'm not sure. Yeah. I'm not sure who it would be. And actually, so Peralta did pitch August 3rd for the Yankees minor league team. He went 1 1/3. July 31st, he went an inning. Even in the minors, he hasn't been stretched out. So I don't see this guy going deep into this game at all. I don't know who would be coming in after him either, though. The DraftKings blurb says Steven Ridings and Albert Abreu would be the most likely candidates.
Okay.
Abreu didn't pitch yesterday. He threw 15 pitches on Wednesday. Ridings hasn't pitched since Tuesday. So, I mean, you could see either of those guys, but either way, there's not pitching to get to from the Yankees here. And then Marco Gonzalez, I can't make a case for him whatsoever here against the Yankees.
Absolute trash. 574 expected slugging is a dumb number. 19% K percentage, another dumb number. He walks, limits that a little bit. 8.2% underneath 10% is always pretty decent, but it doesn't matter. He's going to face this Yankees team that just looks ridiculous, and they will look ridiculous every single day. And it comes down to people want to stack up the new toy. It's a shiny new toy. They have a 6.9% top stack potential. It's second best on the slate, but 8.7% ownership share. That's not very nice. How do you deal with these Yankees in this spot?
I want to get to them with how the ownership looks right now. About a 7% chance of being the top stack. A little overowned, but with this being a 14-game slate, I just don't think it's that much of a deterrent here. And Marco Gonzalez is just really, really bad. So even if it's not complete, full stacks, I think mixing these guys in as one-offs and mini stacks looks really good. Gonzalez has allowed a 259 expected ISO to righties this year, 171 actual ISO to lefties, 327 expected. So it's not even like he's been good against lefties. Anthony Rizzo is going to look good. Joey Gallo is going to look good. And then, of course, all the right-handed power is going to look great. So I just absolutely love the Yankees.
And Seattle, definite ballpark upgrade, but picking on this bullpen, never my favorite thing to be doing, or picking on any bullpen really that isn't called the Baltimore Orioles. That's the team that I do like to just target. It's like Coors Field every single day of the week. Go Rays for sure. But either way, Seattle here in this spot. How do you deal with them knowing that you're going to kind of get mixed and matched throughout the entire day with a really good bullpen in the Yankees?
Yeah, I think it's pretty tough to really like the Mariners here just because bullpen games are really, really difficult. Like, typically you're just getting a different arm every time you come up to hit. It makes life difficult. I don't really see a whole lot of merit in going to Seattle here.
All righty, guys. I talked about it on the previous stream, but Betting You, check out Betting You. That's Matt Gajewski. I did the NFL, the Hall of Fame game show with him yesterday. We had an absolute blast. And of course, it worked out profitable, especially for the other side of this panel, I would say. One Adam Scherer had a fantastic day. A lot of that has to do with, he's very good at DFS, but then the projections that we have here coming from him. If you want to check him talk about college football, he's just the best. Him and Ben Rossa, my dude that I do all the PGA shows with, they're talking that every single day. They have episodes right now. It's called Betting You. Go to Spotify, go to Apple Podcasts, hit download, check out who they have winning the SEC, the Big 12, or the remnants of the Big 12, which is soon about to be Heisman favorites, all of the things that you guys are starting to care about here as we get closer to college football. If you think they are sharp about NFL, and they are very sharp about NFL, check out their college football podcast. We also have 2 new YouTube channels that you need to be checking out. That is the Awesemo Fantasy Football channel, and that is the Awesemo Odds channel. Both of them constantly putting out content. Hit the subscribe button on those. That goes such a long way for us. They are pinned to the YouTube chat here. We can put them into YouTube chat here as well as we're going along. Producer Tyler doing a fantastic job here, getting called up from the pen, doing a great job in relief here today. Thank you so much to him. And just be hitting subscribe and be on the lookout for videos because NFL is now here. All right, let's move ourselves along to let's see. What's that? Boston? Why do I have Box written on my sheet? What a professional I am. So the Box are playing at Toronto. 9 total runs here in this one. That's just weird to look at. Nathan Eovaldi here on one side. Alek Manoah, my dude. I absolutely love this guy, but I do not love targeting Boston whatsoever. But a 4.2 implied run total is awfully low for this Red Sox team. So is there some merit right now in Manoah's ownership at going to that arm?
Yeah. He's like, he is getting ownership. He's getting about 12.5% on DraftKings, but he's getting less than guys around him like Bassett, less than Aaron Marquez, a lot less than Corbin Burns, which for obvious reasons. But so, 12%, it's not that high. It is a really risky spot, but Manoah also has the second highest strikeout percentage on the slate behind Corbin Burns at 29.2%. He's been okay overall, 4.05 xFIP, 1.33 home runs per 9. It's definitely a risky spot. You're not going to feel very good about it. But like you said, a 4.2 implied run total for Boston is pretty low. Manoah has struck out 27.3% of right-handed hitters so far this year, 144 expected ISO. Lefties, he has a 30.8% strikeout percentage, 142 expected ISO. He's been a good pitcher. So I'm not expecting to get carried away and, just decide that Alek Manoah is like my biggest stand on this slate. I don't think I'm gonna end up doing with him what I ended up doing with Ross Stripling yesterday and just playing him everywhere.
How good are you? How good are you?
I wasn't happy about it, but it worked out. But it is a much more difficult matchup for him than Stripling had yesterday against Cleveland. It's a really risky spot, but the upside is there on a slate where a lot of pitchers just don't have very good strikeout stuff.
No, they really do not. Nathan Eovaldi on the other side, World Series hero once upon a time. How are we handling him in this spot?
I'm intrigued by him if he's not going to get ownership. He's projected for about 1% ownership on DraftKings right now, about a 7% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. But this is just a really good real life pitcher. He's allowed 0.52 home runs per 9 this year. 3.57 xFIP is very good. 4.3% walk percentage is excellent. 23.5% strikeout percentage is fine, especially for a pitcher that's only $7,900. The issue, of course, is that the Blue Jays have a very, very good offense. They're really dangerous. They don't even strike out a lot for an offense that has as much power as they do. But in terms of talent, Eovaldi's just, I think underpriced. And when you start comparing him to other players in that price range, he's $500 more than Gibson, who's getting 17 times the ownership. Gibson is certainly far from a lock to have a good game against the Mets. The Mets actually have like an identical implied run total to the Blue Jays as well. Also in that price range, you have Mike Minor against St. Louis, pretty mediocre spot. He's getting about 10 times the ownership. Eovaldi's less expensive than Wade Miley. It's just, I think he's too talented for his salary given the really low ownership. So I do like the idea in large field tournaments of taking some shots on Eovaldi against Toronto.
Yeah, and it's not a team. Neither of these teams are ones you want to be picking on whatsoever. And Toronto, second lowest K percentage up against righties here. on the season, 21.1%, 114 WRC plus. But again, we're talking large field tournaments, and 197 ISO for Toronto as well, up against righties, second best in baseball, behind the, of course, San Francisco Giants, because that makes a lot of sense to me. Nathan Eovaldi, not somebody that I would normally get to a lot, but considering 1% and trying to get different on some of these large fields, he shouldn't be at that number. Maybe that comes up a little bit, but Alek Manoah for sure, I really like as well. But I also like getting Boston whenever they're under owned, which is the case here again today. We have 28 total teams here on the slate, only a 3% chance of top stack. But if they're only going to be 1% ownership in the Rogers Center here, give me a couple of Boston bats here on the other side too.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's still a boom bust spot, even though Manoah is good. He's far from a sure thing. He's still in his rookie year. He's had home run issues with 1.3 home runs per 9, like we had mentioned before. And it's a good Boston offense. They are not getting a lot of ownership. Manoah is getting some ownership. So I'm with you. I think Boston, especially as your tournament, as your contest size gets bigger, Boston starts to look a little bit better.
And Toronto on the other side, also a team that I feel like I've played every single slate. I think Greg was the one who was talking about that the other day, where it's like, this team comes in under-owned because the salaries are out of control. But I don't think I would have it any other way, because it's a team that just carries so much upside against any pitcher in any spot. And if they're going to be under-owned, which they've been almost every slate, give me Toronto on the other side too. How do you feel about them here?
It's
not as good.
Yeah, it's kind of weird because they do have the higher implied run total. They do have a crazy good offense. The thing is, though, Nathan Eovaldi's not getting any ownership, so you're not getting any leverage that way. Toronto's basically the same as Boston in terms of top stack percentage. They're also not getting ownership, so you can still make the case. Anytime Toronto is very low owned, they're a good tournament stack because they have so much power. It's just that I actually think I'd be more likely to get to Boston just because you are getting a little bit more leverage when you consider that Alek Manoah is picking up some ownership.
Well, and the prices are kind of spread out. I also think Boston, you can play a lot of guys 1 through 9, whereas Toronto, I really don't like going to the Espinal-McGuire side of it. I know that maybe the catcher wraparound isn't the worst thing here with Toronto. Maybe I've been kind of doing that wrong. Corey Dickerson, I've been playing him every day here, not to much effect. I like that guy. He's my new Adam Eaton, and now Adam Eaton's hitting home runs. So truly, truly just kill me. Anything else from this game?
No, I think that's it. Both offenses are in they're both really high upside offenses naturally. They're both in pretty difficult spots, and both pitchers have upside despite also being difficult spots. So it's just a game where it's almost like the opposite of, we've seen some Red Sox games, even going back to the Tarek Skubal game, I think yesterday afternoon, where we've seen a lot of Red Sox games where it's like, the Red Sox look really good, but so does the pitcher against them. Here, it's like none of them really look that good, but they're all super talented. So if they're not going to get ownership, they're still interesting in tournaments.
Yeah, I think with Manoah, there's no way that if he's going to be a little bit under-owned here that I won't get to some of it here. Just a very, very talented kid in a limited sample, but enjoying watching him pitch for sure. Let's go along to Pittsburgh plus 170 at Cincinnati, 9.5 total runs. We of course saw Cincinnati come through as chalk because that just seems to be the way that life works here of late, but will not be chalk here probably in this spot. JT Brubaker, not the best pitcher in the entire world. I feel like I was playing him randomly a lot earlier in the season, going up against one Wade Miley here on the other side, who I just never play because an 18.5% K percentage is just not something I want to play for 8.2K. Talk to me about pitching here.
Not a whole lot to like, I don't think. Miley does have a very good matchup against Pittsburgh, but he's also priced up. He's kind of like the opposite of Eovaldi at this price point, where if Wade Miley were $1,000 cheaper, he'd be really popular because he's facing the Pirates. So I do kind of think he's priced where he should be, even though he doesn't get a lot of strikeouts. But he doesn't get a lot of strikeouts, but he's in a really good matchup against Pittsburgh. Whereas you compare him to Eovaldi at the same salary, or basically the same salary. Eovaldi's got a brutal matchup, but he's just such a better pitcher than Miley. I typically lean towards the talent over the matchup, but reasonable minds disagree there. It is a good matchup for Miley at 8,200. He's projected for 4.5% ownership, which I think is fine. On the other side, JT Brubaker, I think, is actually a decent pitcher. He has been so far this year, at least. He's struck out 23.8% of hitters, 3.82 xFIP. He has had issues with home runs, though, and this is a really difficult park to pitch in. It's also a pretty dangerous Cincinnati lineup. So I think it's going to be difficult to get to Brubaker. Definitely going to be more interested in those Reds bats again.
Yeah, and now we're not going to see the same crazy amount of ownership we saw of them yesterday. Joey Votto hits a home run every single day of the week. He's up to 6K. Things I did not expect to see in the 2021 MLB DFS season. Joey Votto at 6K.
Yeah, him and Adam Wainwright. I don't know who's made a bigger case for like guys that I thought were washed 3 years ago and just like rounding out their careers.
So dumb. It's absurd. And now Jonathan India, Jesse Winker, Nick Castellanos now in the lineup. He's up to 4K, up to 4K from his 3.7 yesterday. That's funny to say out loud here. Where are we kind of looking in stacking up this team? Because it looks pretty good 1 through 8.
Yeah, there's power top to bottom. Even like if Tucker Barnhart's hitting 8th, that's a reasonable catcher option. Eugenio Suarez has had his struggles this year, but as a 7 hitter, that's a lot of power for him as well. So I do kind of like that the Reds are getting more expensive because it does at least keep the ownership down. It was really frustrating a month or so ago when this whole team was like 4K flat, hitting in Great American Park against bad pitching, and you just couldn't really do anything about it. I like that they're only getting about 4.5% aggregate ownership right now, 4th highest top stack percentage. And, I mentioned Brubaker's been pretty solid this year, but he has had home run issues. 170 expected ISO to lefties, 195 to righties. And there's just a lot of power from both sides of the plate here for Cincinnati. So I think they do look like a very good stack.
And Wade Miley, he does a great job at limiting hard contact here on the other side. And there's really nobody who can make hard contact outside of one Brian Reynolds, who I play as a one-off probably every single day, just because I think he's a really good hitter, and I believe you do as well. Who could we possibly play other than Brian Reynolds from Pittsburgh today?
Brian Hayes, Jacob Stallings, okay. But they're definitely not anywhere close to the top of my list.
All right, perfect. Anything else from this game?
Nope.
All right. Detroit plus 125 at Cleveland, 9.5 total runs. I'm going to make up a little bit of time. We'll get flying because, again, I can talk very fast. Matt Manning on one side has been very, very bad, not living up to the promise that he had as a prospect. One of the better arms that Detroit had coming in, and he has not come to fruition. The K's have not been there in any kind of meaningful way. Quantrill on the other side, 6.8K for him. I just don't see anything from pitching here. What do you see?
You can still make a case for a $5,300 Matt Manning, I think. He's been bad, like you said, but the strikeouts have been a little bit better. And by that, I mean, he's gotten at least 3 strikeouts in 4 straight games, which
yay
is good for him.
Give him a button. Give the man a freaking button.
It's crazy. I mean, I don't really remember. Normally when you see like top prospects come up and fail, they start walking guys, they start giving up home runs, but like they still get decent strikeout numbers. I don't remember.
Tyler Glasnow thing. It's like when Glasnow got called up.
But he still struck guys out, didn't he?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. I'm saying that's normally what you see. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Manning, it's just like he completely forgot how to strike hitters out entirely, which is really, really weird. But the thing that I come back to here is that he has had success in the minor leagues. He is a top prospect, and he's facing a minor league team today in the Indians. So I think maybe he has, a decent path to success. I'm not saying I think, you should just play tons and tons of Matt Manning, but he is only 5,300. We've seen this Indians team, give up big games to Ryu and Nats and Stripling, pretty much everyone who's faced them recently. Those guys are all, certainly better at this point than Matt Manning. But the point being, this is just a Cleveland team that's not very good. I assume Jose Ramirez will be back in the lineup today, which does make them a little bit more potent, but I don't really mind taking a chance on a $5,300 Manning just because he is essentially, he's not minimum salary, but he's may as well be, just really inexpensive, not getting ownership. On the other side, though, Cal Quantrill, not very good either and more expensive than Manning. So I don't really see any way to get to Quantrill.
I have a dumb question, probably going to be the dumbest question I've ever asked you in the history of our show. Who would you rather play, Matt Manning or Mike Fultonavich today on DraftKings?
Manning.
Okay, I think I would too. So at least I will give you that, where I would much rather still go to his side of it. I know Mike Fultonavich is 400 less, but if we're going to just talk straight out punts, like who we want to absolutely straight out punt with, I think I would rather go to Manning for sure. Because Cleveland, we just don't know what we're getting out of that lineup ever. It's awful. Roberto Perez might be back here today. That doesn't really matter to me whatsoever. Miles Straw leading off here now for the Cleveland Indians. This lineup is garbage. Jose Ramirez, Franmil Reyes, always viable on the other side here. But yeah, if Matt Manning were to survive in a spot, probably would be this Cleveland side, but they do have a 5.2 implied total. Looking at the top stacks tool as well, coming in with 5.3% top stack potential, 10% ownership share. I don't want to play a popular Cleveland team whatsoever outside of Ramirez and Reyes. Do you?
No, I don't. Like, I'm never opposed to Ramirez, Reyes. But the thing is that, like, Matt Manning hasn't been good. Cleveland has a healthy 5.2 implied run total, and the team is essentially free outside of like Rosario, Ramirez, and Reyes. You have Bobby Bradley at 3,500, Miles Straw probably leading off at 2,600, Harold Ramirez 2,800, Oscar Mercado at 2,600. It's just so easy to get to this team. I think that's reflected in the projected ownership. You're just going to see a lot of these guys plugged into lineups, and then people being able to pay up for pitching. It's just not a good offense. I hate going to these teams that are like, they're getting ownership because they're facing a bad pitcher and they're cheap, but they're still terrible hitters for the most part. At least, most of the lineup. So they're still going to fail a lot. And that's another reason that I kind of like the idea of going to Matt Manning in larger field tournaments, is if he pitches well, you are taking, around 10% of the field out. And, again, just to get back to Manning for a minute, like even at AAA this year, he's been good. He's made 7 total starts at AAA, 8 in the majors. At AAA, he has struck out 25% of hitters this year. It's just really weird. I think that the strikeout numbers have to come up, at least to some extent. He's probably not going to get to 23, 24% anytime soon, but the pedigree is there. The talent is there. It's not like he's just fallen off a cliff at AAA too. And he has been a little bit better recently. So I understand why Cleveland's getting ownership, but I would actually rather go to Manning than the Indians.
I would agree with that as well. Detroit Tigers on the other side. Again, we've talked about them at length, I feel like, because it seems like they're on every single slate to have moderate discussions about here because they've been better of late. Cal Quantrill, not a very good pitcher, but Detroit, looking at this implied run total, it's a lot lower than we've seen out of them here of late because they've been in some really good spots, 4.4 total runs, but at least they're cheap here throughout the lineup. Eric Haas is not 4.7K, but any interest in Tigers on the way out the door?
Yeah, as long as they're not going to get a ton of ownership, and right now they're not. This is one of those teams where when they're popular, I just stay away because they're not the best hitters. They seem to always come through when they're popular, though, which has been frustrating. But now they're not getting as much ownership. Quantrill has struggled this year. 13.6% strikeout percentage to righties, 20% to lefties, 189 expected ISO to lefties, only 110 to righties is pretty good, but. Looking at Akil Baddoo, I think looks good leading off. If Robbie Grossman is in the lineup at 3,200, that's a good value. It's still not a team I'm going to get tons of, but I do think there's some upside there. You mentioned Haas, that's a good play as well.
All right. Washington plus 170 at Atlanta, 9 total runs here in this one. On one side of the mountain, we have Eric Fetty. I love doing that. It's just fun. Kyle Muller on the other side, 9.2K. That's a big number for Kyle Muller here. Has he been worthy of it? It's been okay. It's been pretty decent here. 2.43 ERA, 1.15 whip. Really good real pitcher here. 7 Ks. We had a 9K game there up against Cincinnati as well. Looks like a pretty decent pitcher here. This Washington team is very, very garbage. And looking at the top pitchers tool, he's not like really moving up the board here in a crazy way. What do you think about him here in this spot?
I really like him. I think
too.
Like it's kind of tough to feel comfortable rostering Kyle Muller at 9,200, but at the same time, a lot of numbers back it up. He's got the 3rd highest strikeout percentage on this slate at 27.8%. He's only allowed 0.3 home runs per 9 this year. 4.65 xFIP isn't very good, but a lot of that, he does walk too many guys. He has a 13% walk percentage. The strikeouts, though, are just, what I keep coming back to when you're going up against this Nats team that outside of Juan Soto and Josh Bell really doesn't have major league hitters. And Juan Soto, by the way, is dealing with some sort of injury he picked up yesterday, so he may not even be in the lineup. And if that's the case, it's going to be obviously an even better spot for Muller. So not getting much ownership here. You compare him to Chris Bassett, who's $600 more and getting 10 times the ownership. I think Bassett's a very, very, very good option today, and we'll talk about that, but still probably doesn't deserve 10 times the ownership of Kyle Muller against this Nats team. So I do really, really like Muller here.
If Soto's not in that lineup, I will have a crazy amount of Kyle Muller at this current ownership, but I would expect that would come up with no Soto for sure. Plus, it's Soto left on left. Not that it matters because Soto's a great hitter in all spots, but I got to assume that's got to be a little bit of an upgrade for him to have the best hitter on the other side, at least have the platoon split in his advantage. Eric Fetty, I will target forever here. Atlanta, Jock Peterson will be leading off more than likely here now that he's facing a righty here. And now there's power with Soler and Duvall in the middle section of this lineup. Another team that I feel like 1 through 8, you can kind of stack it up any which direction.
Yeah, I just absolutely love the moves that Atlanta made at the deadline. Eric Fetty, not a total gas can, but also not a great pitcher here. Definitely not someone I'm going to shy away from taking hitters against. So far this year, 179 expected ISO to righties, 170 to lefties. And there's just so much power top to bottom. You'll probably have, like, the projected lineup right now has Dansby Swanson hitting 7. 2 weeks ago, this was their 5-hitter, but you add Peterson to the lineup, you add Adam Duvall, you add Jorge Soler. And another thing to keep in mind with Fetty, he struck out 24.1% of right-handed hitters this year, but going back to the start of the 2019 season, only a 17.7% strikeout percentage. So there's a decent chance that number comes down over a larger sample. When you talk about hitters like Jorge Soler and Adam Duvall, these are guys that do a lot of damage when they hit the ball. And a pitcher like Fetty, who at best is probably an average strikeout pitcher, I think it sets up really well for guys like that. I think the Braves look great.
Somebody said Fetty pitched well last time out. That's Eric Johnson. Eric Johnson, you know better than to look at a 1-game sample size. Don't do that to me. Don't hurt my feelings at 8:54 in the morning. I'm not okay with that. But anything else here that really sticks out to you? Somebody said Kai Boom as well, sneaky at 2,100. Everybody is sneaky on a 14-game slate that's facing any kind of competent pitcher. And Kyle Muller, again, not somebody I want to be picking on, but Carter Kai Boom, shout out, 2.1K. How do you feel about him?
He's actually been hitting well, which is pretty kind of surprising. But I'm not going out of my way to get to him. I don't really care what he's done in the last 5 games.
Yep. That is the same take that I have here. Another take that I do have here, I think producer Tyler, he's chilling right there. Hey, buddy. Let's put up the at Awesemo Plus. We got Awesemo Plus tools and content right now, $29.95 for the weekly pass. That is the best deal that you will find in the industry because it has premium Slack channel. You can ask any of our experts, myself included. If I guess you can call me an expert. I like that feeling. You can ask us anything you want in the premium Slack channel. It is like the easiest resource to have all of your questions answered. The lineup builder and so much more. The projections, the top stacks tool, the top pitchers tool, everything here. $29.95 right now for that. If you're new to Awesemo Plus, MLB Strategy Show, all caps, one word, put that together, 25% off your first week of Awesemo Plus Platinum and $15.95 for the weekly package for MLB, if that's just what you're looking for. But MMA, NFL is coming up here soon. Check out all of those. I almost said goodies, but I have totally made myself realize that I say that word too much. Tyler's laughing because he knows goodies is like my word. It's a trigger now. So I've kind of conditioned myself out of it. It feels good. Let's move ourselves along. We've got a lot of baseball to talk about in 25 minutes. We can get it done in 25 minutes here. Minnesota plus 170 at Houston, 9 total runs here. In this one, I felt pretty good about the Minnesota stack after the first inning. I did not feel good about it the rest of the game here, but Bailey Ober on one side, Zach Greinke on the other. Probably not going to be going to my Twins whatsoever here in this spot, but Bailey Ober, a guy who had a little bit of promise coming up here for the Twins, but it's not really panning out in any kind of meaningful way. Now righties on the season up against Houston. I mean, there's just no Ks to be had. 20% K percentage on the season, 118 WRC plus, but yeah, both of those marks best in baseball. How are we feeling about pitchers here?
Not very good. Ober just not going deep into games. He's shown good strikeout stuff so far, but brutal matchup here against the Astros and not going deep in the games. I don't really see a case to get to Bailey Ober. Zach Greinke on the other side is still an okay real life pitcher. He just kind of keeps finding ways to somehow get guys out, but the strikeout numbers aren't there. 18.4% strikeout percentage for the season. Still doesn't walk guys, but really expensive at 9,600 against a watered down Twins team, but still not a terrible team. Like they're not, they lost Nelson Cruz. They're not as good a lineup, but they're not the Nats or the Indians either. This isn't, the worst team in baseball or anything. And it helps that the young guys they have kind of called up, like Brent Rooker and Trevor Larnach, are actually good prospects that have some power. So I don't really see much in the way of pitching at all.
So we see Houston on one side with a boatload of ownership, by far the highest owned team here on this slate, 12.8%, negative almost 8 leverage there. That is a bad mark to be seeing here. I don't know, Kyle Tucker, I might have to quit you today. I don't want to. I don't want to not click your name because it's really fun to do. But what do you do with Houston at this kind of ownership?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of sucks because they are in a good spot here, I think, against Ober and a pretty bad Minnesota bullpen, but they are just getting tons of ownership, and it makes sense because they're mispriced, especially if Yuli Gurriel misses this game again and you get, a cheap whoever fills in for him. It's just going to make it even easier to stack this team. But Brantley at 3K is a mispricing. Yordan Alvarez at 4,500 is wrong. Carlos Correa at 4,100 is wrong. Kyle Tucker at 3,700 is insanely wrong. It's just, it's a mispriced team in a pretty good spot. Bailey Ober has had more issues with lefties than righties this year. 217 expected ISO to the lefties, 156 to righties. His actual ISO is bad to both sides, 258 to lefties and 237 to righties, but seems like he's gotten a little bit more unlucky against the righties, and he has struck out 30.5% of righties compared to 21% of lefties. So Yordan Alvarez, Kyle Tucker, Michael Brantley, those three really stand out, but then you're not going to, I'm not going to talk anyone off of like Altuve or Carlos Correa. And then Aledmys Diaz is really cheap. He hit fifth yesterday. He could get a lineup bump if Gurriel is out. It's just a really cheap team. But I think that my approach to them, because of the ownership they're getting, will be more so to stack lower owned teams and then mix in the guys I really want, like Kyle Tucker and Yordan Alvarez.
Anything else from this game?
No.
All right. San Francisco Giants plus 135 at Milwaukee. 8 total runs here in this one, mainly because of Milwaukee, because the Giants have the worst matchup here on the board. Corbin Burns on one side of it. We know the kind of potential he has, and it's showing up in the top pitchers tool for sure. I will say Corbin Burns got absolutely shelled last time out as super chalk, but I don't really care. I think it's right back to the well with him. Apparently the field does too, 47% ownership. Is there any reason for concern for Corbin Burns going up against the San Francisco team, which again, against right-handed pitching this season, the number one team in terms of ISO, 202 on the season?
I mean, I think that would be the concern, is that the Giants do have a lot of good hitters. They just got Brandon Belt back as well. Mike Yastrzemski's missed the last couple of games, but he could potentially be in the lineup. Even if he's not, it's probably Alex Dickerson, who's good. This team, they're just so weird. Like, they have so many guys that nobody that doesn't play MLB DFS every single day has heard of. But like the entire team, no matter who is in the lineup, is an above average hitter. It's just really, really weird. And they do get a positive park shift here going into Milwaukee. All of that being said, Corbin Burns is not that expensive. He's only 10K, which isn't a crazy high price tag. He has the highest strikeout percentage on the slate by nearly 7 full points, 36% strikeout percentage, 4.7% walk percentage, 2.19 xFIP, 0.34 home runs per 9. The guy is just an insanely good pitcher. And he struggled last time out against, I think it was Atlanta. But other than that, it's just been an absolutely phenomenal pitcher this year. I have no real reason to look to get away from him. All
right. And on the other side, Logan Webb, really good pitcher that I like, that it seems like nobody really plays here ever. That is what I'm looking at here. Yeah, Logan Webb, 7.2K. That's too cheap for, I think, Logan Webb and his potential here in this spot, considering there's the exact kind of situation we're seeing with Kyle Muller, and he's $2,000 less. Should we be looking at some Logan Webb today?
Yeah, I'm really confused why he's not getting more ownership, actually, because he's actually a good pitcher. He's cheap. He's in that Kyle Gibson price range, but Gibson's getting like 5 times the ownership. It's a negative park shift for Webb, going into whatever they're calling Miller Park now. But he threw 94 pitches last time out, which was really good to see because they've been slowly ramping him up. He's gone 45, 60, 75, 80, 94. So now he should, for all intents and purposes, be fully stretched out. Overall this season, he has struck out 24% of hitters, which is good. A reasonable 7.5% walk percentage, very good 3.17 xFIP, 0.75 home runs per 9. Looking to his splits, 21. That's since 2020. 24.2% strikeout percentage against righties, 23.9 against lefties. So nothing drastic there. He's holding lefties to a 132 expected ISO, righties to a 0.099 expected ISO. Does a very good job getting ground balls. The Brewers lineup is relatively dangerous and the park is tough, but I really don't know why Logan Webb's not getting more ownership.
Agreed. And American Family Field, it went from Miller Park to a very wholesome name, which is, I don't know, very Midwestern of them to do, for sure. Milwaukee side still getting, not really a lot of ownership here. I'm just looking at that implied total. I feel like this would be a great under. If you're heading over to Odd Shopper, which is the sponsor of the I guess, strategy show here this morning, Odd Shopper, I really like both these pitchers. I think Logan Webb, 4.4 implied runs feels a little high here for Milwaukee. Maybe it's a little bit I don't know the reasoning for it. Eduardo Escobar, a nice addition to that lineup, and Rowdy Tellez is actually a human being who's capable, but Yelich continues to be out, and he was not nearly as effective this season. So I'm confused a little bit by that number. Maybe a nice thing to be taking an under on. Check out all of the offerings that we have here at Awesemo in terms of the sports betting model here as well to kind of check some of that stuff. It's the best tool that you can use if you have sports betting legal in your state. Check that out. But anything else here from this game? Any hitters that really stand out to you from either side?
No, I just have so much respect for both of these pitchers. The only thing offense-wise that I would say here is and I say this, every slate, it has nothing to do with Corbin Burnes. There's always a case in those large, the massive field, $18 or $12, whatever, 100K to first. There's always a case when a pitcher is going to be 40 to 50% owned and just stacking against him. Corbin Burnes is about as good as it gets, and it's an extremely low probability spot, but it's at least worth a mention. I think I'll probably just end up getting more Burnes, and if he doesn't pitch well, then I lose.
Yeah, Lucas Giolito syndrome, 0.5% right. Kansas City Royals stack that goes off and wins the $10 iteration on Wednesday. That's 100K decisions. So I might have one stack just on the other side of Burnes because I'm going to have way over the field right now at the current number. There's just not a lot of pitching I feel that great about on this slate. And of course, there's always viability to going cheaper. But Corbin Burnes, I feel like if somebody's going to put up 35, 40 fantasy points, he'd be the one to do it today. But I digress. Let's move ourselves along. We've got 15 minutes to rock. 5 games to go. Let's speed. Kansas City Royals plus 148 at St. Louis here. You were talking about Adam Wainwright a little bit earlier, how you're just blown away by how much better he's been this season. I am as well. 9.5K here on this side on DraftKings. Any viability to going to him up against Mike Minor here?
Yeah, I think the ownership's about where it should be at 16%. He's priced a little more expensive than I'm comfortable with. But again, when you compare him to a lot of the pitchers around him, Corbin Burnes, I think, is clearly better. Chris Bassett, I think, is clearly better. Alek Manoah is facing the Red Sox. So, I think Wainwright clearly has the better matchup at the very least. And then, Kyle Muller is not getting nearly as much ownership. I do like Muller quite a bit, as we talked about. But, I think Wainwright deserves to be in that around, 15% range. It's a pretty good matchup against Kansas City. They don't have Jorge Soler anymore, which that takes strikeouts out of the lineup, but also takes a lot of power out. Benintendi may or may not be back today. We've seen Kansas City have some decent performances recently, but it's still a lineup that isn't very good and does give you some upside. For the season, Wainwright's just been a respectable pitcher, 22.9% K rate, 3.82 xFIP, not home runs per nine. That would be terrible. 1.15 home runs per nine. He's had just a resurgent year. He's not someone that I want my night revolving around, but I don't really see any reason to take some huge anti-Adam Wainwright stand either. He's kind of just, I think, getting the ownership he deserves.
And Mike Minor. This could be problems for Mike Minor. He's got a 5.66 ERA up against righties and lefties, 3.54, just, the historical normal here platoon situation. And you're going to get a bunch of righties, and they're all pretty darn good for this Cardinals team. Every single player in the projected lineup from the right side. Ooh, Mike Minor, 7.8K. Can you take some shots here whatsoever?
Yeah, I mean, he's just kind of a guy. I think he's like the definition of an average pitcher pretty much. Strikes out about 23% of hitters, allows 1.36 home runs per nine, 4.32 xFIP. He's just a guy. He's priced at 7,800, which is where guys like him should be priced. The Cardinals are an okay offense. They're not great. They're not terrible. The fact that it's going to be entirely right-handed does knock down his strikeout projection a little bit because he's only struck out 22% of righties this year compared to 27.9% of lefties, but he does get to face a pitcher, whereas pitching the American League for most of his starts, obviously he doesn't. He's getting about 10% ownership. That seems very reasonable to me. I don't anticipate just jamming in a bunch of Mike Minor. I don't anticipate having none. I think that just seems about right.
Agreed. Love that. And then hitters on both sides. I mean, the Royals, again, it's super, super low ownership. They've got enough good hitters. If they get Benintendi back in that lineup, only 2.9K for him going up against Wainwright. Wouldn't mind some of that stuff. Kansas City, Sal Perez, I feel like is a guy we always kind of point out because the catcher spot. He's down to 4.2K, and he does hit baseballs very, very hard. Wouldn't mind that as a one-off. But anything else really stand out to you from Kansas City?
No, not really. I mean, Carlos Santana is really cheap as well. I guess the one thing that stands out is the Royals are just cheap. Whit Merrifield's down to 3,800. I haven't looked, but I feel like that's the cheapest salary we've had on him in a long time. Carlos Santana at 3,400 is really inexpensive. You mentioned Benintendi possibly being back. Perez is cheaper than he really ever should be, given the how good of a hitting catcher he is. For the season, Wainwright has has had more issues with lefties. 163 expected ISO against them compared to 130 against righties, but he's been pretty good against both sides. So there's not anyone that I look at and I'm like, oh, I think this is a great spot for them against Wainwright. But Wainwright also just isn't like an infallible pitcher. He's good, but he's not great. And these are really cheap salaries on Kansas City. So Merrifield, Santana, Perez, Benintendi, like those four, I think look pretty good relative to their salaries, at least.
And another team here in the St. Louis Cardinals that 1 through 8, I think that there's some viability to going to just about anybody on this team. On the St. Louis side, let me know if right now, nobody's getting any ownership. Like nobody's getting ownership on this slate outside of Houston and Cleveland, which, hit eject on those ones. Oh, Miami too, but we'll talk about them here in a second. But St. Louis, anything really stick out to you? Because it seems like they all kind of project out decently.
Yeah, they look decent. They're not in a great spot. They're not really in a bad spot. Mike Minor has allowed a 203 expected ISO to righties this year. He's a decent pitcher, but he will give up home runs. I really don't mind, even if you're not full stacking the Cardinals, just grabbing, 1 or 2 of these guys. Goldschmidt, Arenado, if you have the ability to pay up. Tyler O'Neill, a 221 expected ISO against left-handed pitching in 111 plate appearances since 2019. He is affordable at 3,300. So, I think there's a pretty good chance you get a home run or 2 out of the Cardinals against Minor.
Anything else in this game? All right, let's talk about the weirdest baseball game in the history of MLB DFS today, and that is Coors Field. Miami Marlins taking on the Colorado Rockies. This is also known as the DGIF, or what is it? DGAF game, because both teams absolutely suck. They are terrible, but you have German Marquez on the mound facing Sandy Alcantara, 2 very competent pitchers, not just competent, I think just flat out good pitchers. First time that I've seen a total under 10 here for a Coors Field game in quite some time. What are we doing with pitchers here, considering right now in our top pitchers tool, German Marquez, number 2 in Coors Field, taking on this Miami team?
I want to play both of them. Marquez is the one that first that primarily stands out. 8,400, like you said, second highest top 2 pitcher percentage, getting 22% ownership. It's always kind of scary going to a popular pitcher in Coors, but I think he's just mispriced for this matchup against Miami. And, he's just a good pitcher. So far at Coors this year, he has struck out 23.8% of hitters. He has a 10% walk percentage, only a 3.54 xFIP. His numbers on the road have definitely been better. The strikeout percentage goes up, the walk rate goes down, but he's still been a good pitcher at home in Coors. He's just a good pitcher overall. Like you said, a 4.3 implied run total for Miami in Coors is basically unheard of. I think Marquez looks very good. On the other side, though, you're not getting any ownership going to Sandy Alcantara. He's only $300 more than German Marquez. For the season, Alcantara has struck out 22.2% of hitters, 3.75 xFIP, 0.81 home runs per 9. It's certainly a risky spot for him, but let's not act like these Rockies can hit either. I mean, like Trevor Story's good. He believes he's going to have a good rest of the season now that the trade deadline's passed and he's not stressing about that. It makes sense to me that he, given that he's admitted that it was affecting him. Blackman may or may not still be good. Tapia is okay, but overall, this lineup is just not good. They've been one of the worst offenses in baseball all season long. Sandy Alcantara certainly has the ability to strike some guys out, and he's just a good pitcher. So if I can only roster one, I feel more confident in Marquez. But given the gap in ownership, I really don't think we should just be sleeping on Sandy Alcantara either.
I love that. And 73 WRC plus for the Colorado Rockies on the season, and that adjusts for ballpark. So I got to feel that that's something that we got to feel pretty confident about, where I think he might be able to limit some damage here. And sure, yeah, Trevor Story can have a great second half of the season. If he gets 2 home runs again, I might drop kick myself. But looking at these stacks right now, the other thing is that they're just coming in over-owned as a result of just 2 really competent pitchers. Colorado, I guess, is pretty flat here, but the Miami side for sure, 7.6% ownership share. Who would you want to be rostering here other than just saying, oh, it's Coors Field and it's German Marquez, who's going to be a semi-popular pitcher here on this slate? I guess only 22%, so it's not a ton of leverage to be had. How do you handle this Miami team specifically, considering there's such a gap between their top stack potential and their ownership?
There's not really one guy that stands out that I'm like, oh, this is a really good spot for them. I think if you think about the way that like Coors Field plays, Lewis Brinson and Jazz Chisholm, but Brinson in particular because he's 2K, like they get a bump, like because they're fast. So one of the things about Coors is, not only do home runs increase, but the outfield is just massive. So a lot of balls that would be singles in other parks, you get a chance to turn into 2, you get a chance to turn doubles into triples. Guys like Lewis Brinson can really take advantage of that, but he's also probably just going to strike out 3 times. So it doesn't really matter. it really to me is more, I either want like 5 Miami guys and just hope Marquez has a terrible start, or just go somewhere else.
In Colorado side, of course, sure, have a couple stacks here of Colorado, especially if they're going to be flat ownership on them here in this spot. Charlie Blackmon has been just abysmal, and there are no words. Sam Hilliard, 2.6K, kind of a misprice for him. If he's batting 7th or 8th, it doesn't really matter. Seems like an all right guy to have included into your pool for sure. But anything stand out to you in a meaningful way for Colorado?
So I'd mentioned, having some interest in Alcantara just because I think he's a decent pitcher. I think it is also worth noting, especially because this game is in Coors, he's been drastically better in Miami than outside of Miami this year, which makes sense given that park. But he's got a 24.3% strikeout percentage at home, only 20% on the road. Walk rate jumps 3 points on the road. Still hasn't really given up power, home or away. But I think it's worth noting that it just does seem like a much better spot for the Rockies than for Miami. So I think full stacks of Colorado look pretty good, but individually, Trevor Story is always going to be a strong option. Raimel Tapia at 4,300 is probably too cheap, assuming he's leading off. Same goes for Blackmon hitting third. Even though I have some interest in Alcantara at really low ownership, I do actually like the Rockies stack here, whereas the Marlins, I'm kind of just not interested.
Anything else from this game?
Nope.
All right, let's keep it moving. We got 3 to go. We're going to fly Texas plus 240 at Oakland. 8 total runs here in this one. Another pitcher that we're really going to be interested in here, Chris Bassett, because the Texas Rangers are very, very bad at hitting baseballs here, should I say, especially
throwing them too.
Throwing them too, because Mike Foltynewicz on the mound. Yeah, thank you for that clarification because it was important to be known. Chris Bassett, we like him, yes?
Yeah, absolutely love Bassett. Really, it's a good park to pitch in. It's a great matchup. Texas has a 3 implied run total, which I believe is the lowest on the slate by like a half run or something. Just really, really, really good spot for Bassett. He is pulling ownership. He should be. He's second highest. He's projected to be the second highest owned pitcher behind Corbin Burns. He's only $200 less than Burns. That would be like the biggest argument against him, I guess, is that even though the matchup's really good, and Bassett is good, Bassett still has a strikeout percentage 11 points lower than Corbin Burns when you're just talking about upside. But outside of that, just phenomenal spot for Bassett. He's struck out 25% of hitters this year. He has only walked about 6%, 3.91 xFIP. Just a really good pitcher in a good park. It's supposed to be like 70 degrees against a terrible Texas offense.
That seems like a plus. Corbin Burns, 11K on FanDuel. Chris Bassett, 9,800 on FanDuel. Both of them right around 20% ownership on each of them. For 1,200 less, just the savings, depending on what bats it gets you. I really like Chris Bassett here in this spot. Is there something, if you're making one lineup, I guess on DraftKings would be the right question. If you're making one lineup and you have to pick either Burns or Bassett, which one are you siding with right now? Obviously, it's early.
Probably Burns, because I'm assuming that I'm going with some low on offense and that gap in ownership doesn't really matter.
Okay. I probably think that that's the right way of looking at it on DK. FanDuel, again, $1,200 gap. Depends on what you can get out of that money for sure. But then the Oakland A's, oh man, 5 implied run total in this ballpark is always something to tell you how bad Mike Foltynewicz has been. And Mike Foltynewicz has been every bit as bad as you could expect. 16% K percentage, 507 expected slugging, 45% hard hit percentage, gives high fly balls to deep center field, way back. It's gone. How do we like the A's today?
I like them. I think the ownership looks like it's coming in around where it should be. The only real negative here is that, the hitting conditions suck. The park sucks for hitting. Foul balls that would be 10 rows deep elsewhere end up being caught by the first baseman. Yeah. The outfield's massive. It's a really, really tough place to hit. So that does make it a less appealing spot than it would be if they were facing Folty in most other places. But Folty has just really struggled with power this year. 205 expected ISO to righties, 280 to lefties. He's not striking guys out. And this is just a very, very dangerous Oakland lineup top to bottom. They added Starling Marte, which gives you power and speed. The only guy in this lineup that when he comes up, you're not afraid is going to hit a home run is Elvis Andrus. Mark Canha, Marte, Olsen, Lowry, Laureano, Moreland, Chapman, Murphy. These guys all just rake and have so much power. So I think it's a really, really tough spot to get to Foltynewicz. I understand he's 4,900. I made the case the other day when Colby Allard pitched. Like I do believe that any starting pitcher that's fully stretched out around 5K is underpriced, regardless really of who they are, just because they're still going to go 5 or 6 innings a decent amount of the time. So you can make that sort of argument for Folty. But there's no faulty is good argument. There's no the matchup is good argument. It's basically he's fully stretched out and he's pitching in Oakland if you are trying to make some sort of case for him. Whoever mentioned it in chat earlier, I don't care that Fulton Nevich just had a couple of good starts against the A's this year.
Yeah, I really do not care whatsoever. And Starling Marte, little nice addition to that lineup, I would say, considering the dude's going to run amok. He's been my highest owned one-off. Him and Kyle Tucker, I'm just going to claim as mine because especially you have the protection of the lineup, but I think that might be something that can be overhyped sometimes. But like, there's a lot of hitters behind him that did not exist in Miami. So Starling Marte is going to be running. They've got to be at least cognizant of locating because Matt Olson sits right behind him there. That's pretty useful, like that little tandem here today. If you're not going to be full stacking them whatsoever, Marte, Olson, give me all of that. Anything else from this game?
Nope.
All right, Arizona plus 190 going up against the Padres here, 8.5 total runs. Caleb Smith, somebody that I feel like I've been playing a lot more of late as well. It seems like he's at a great price point. And now going up against the San Diego team that is absent one, Fernando Tatis. That is a huge upgrade in this spot. Frazier, Cronenworth, Hosmer, all lefties that are projected in this lineup here going up against him. How do we feel about Caleb Smith at 7K today?
I don't feel great about it. I understand you can make the argument. He has the fifth or sixth highest strikeout percentage on the slate at 25.1%. So there is an upside case to be made, but he has still walked 13.5% of hitters this year. He has a 5.35 xFIP. He's allowed 2.1 home runs per 9. I know San Diego is not going to have Tatis, but it's still a very, very good lineup top to bottom. A lot of guys that can do damage. I have a hard time getting to Caleb Smith here.
All righty. And then Ryan Weathers on the other side here. Not a very good pitcher, 17.5% K percentage, 464 expected slugging. I can't be looking too much here at this, but it's a very bad Arizona Diamondbacks team. 6.1 K. Can I talk you into him whatsoever?
It's a good matchup. I think he's a decent prospect. He hasn't really put up good numbers in the majors so far. Fangraphs has him as the number 6 prospect for the Padres, not ranked in the top 100 in MLB. But like you said, 17.5% strikeout percentage in the majors this year. 2019 in A ball, he threw 96 innings, struck out 22.8%. So it doesn't really look like a really good strikeout guy. He is young. He did make the leap from A ball to AAA and then the majors this year. So this is someone that, a couple years down the road certainly could be good. But right now, strikeout stuff hasn't really been there. He's also just not going deep into games. He threw 81 pitches his last time out, still only went 4 innings. He's gone more than 4 innings once in his last 6 starts. So, I mean, it's just really, the matchup's good. The salary's okay. It's just difficult to really see him having any sort of a ceiling.
And why play him when you can play the number 13 prospect in baseball and one Matt Manning?
Yeah, exactly.
For 5,300, right?
Yeah, of course.
I hate today. It's just, this is going to go very, very poorly, but I felt overly confident about my lineups for the last week and a half. So maybe I need to feel like a little bit of garbage. I need to inherit more garbage into my lineups. Matt Manning, good Lord. All right. Arizona on the one side, if we're not going to be playing Ryan Weathers, and if we think that he's probably bad, which I think he might be here. Oh, Arizona, 3.5 implied runs. It's such a gross number. San Diego, 65 degrees there today. Not a great hitting environment, but maybe take some shots here in Arizona. It's super, super low ownership.
I don't really love it. I mean, they're just so bad, but I think I think one-offs maybe make some sense. Weathers has had home run issues, 196 expected ISO to righties, 213 actual ISO. And there are cheap bats here, from the right side. Ketel Marte is 3,600. Carson Kelly is a relatively high upside catcher option at 2,800. Christian Walker, 2,400. I mean, these guys do have some pop. I prefer trying to grab like 1 or 2 of them and get a home run or 2 than trying to get 5 of these very mediocre hitters to all hit at the same time.
And then San Diego, 5.1 implied runs going up against Caleb Smith. And that probably makes a little bit more sense for me considering this lineup. And Caleb Smith, though, limits a lot of the hard contact here, 32.6% hard hit percentage on the season, but 406 expected slugging. We've got some really good hitters here between Manny Machado. Hosmer's been better of late. Tommy Pham. Can we be looking at San Diego in this spot?
Yeah, it does look like they're getting the ownership that they deserve. So probably not a team that's jumping to the top for me, but a very high upside spot with how many guys Caleb Smith walks and a bad Arizona bullpen behind them. We've seen it a couple of times recently where Arizona's starter has actually pitched good, and then somehow their opponent ends up with 7 runs because they just go nuts in the last inning or 2. So you do have a lot of add-on potential here. Manny Machado in a good spot, reasonable price tag on guys like Tommy Pham and Will Myers. So it's a pretty good spot for San Diego. I just don't think I'll be going too crazy because I think the ownership's there as well.
Anything else from this game?
Nope.
All right. The 5 freeway series to close it out. Los Angeles Angels plus 184 at Los Angeles Dodgers, 8.5 total runs here on this one. David Price on the mound here. Patrick Sandoval, both guys that okay. Let's temper expectations. I feel like David Price has been more relevant here in the last couple of weeks, now that he's stretched out here. Keeps the ball down, doing his ground ball thing. Patrick Sandoval, same kind of thing here. 27.4% K percentage for him. I mean, these are not offenses you want to be targeting too much, but what are we doing with pitchers in this one?
I think it's really tough because like David Price at 5,800, if I thought he was going to throw 80, 85 pitches, I would definitely be interested. The problem is we haven't really seen him get stretched out like that. It looked like he was going that direction. He threw 66 pitches, then he threw 74. Then he went back to 64. Most recently, he threw an inning in relief on August 1st. 5,800 is, I think, worth a gamble, but the problem is that he's getting 13% ownership right now. So it's kind of like if David Price throws 80 to 85 pitches, he's going to get the ownership that he deserves. And if he throws less than that, you want like no part of him at 13%. It's also not like it's a terrible Angels offense either. It's not great, but they do have some hitters in there that can do damage. I guess Ohtani is not in the projected lineup today. I don't know what his deal is, but there's no DH. So no Ohtani does make the lineup does make the lineup weaker, but I still have trouble for as long as Price is projected for ownership. I have trouble getting there just because I don't know how deep he's going to go into the game, even though they have said they want to stretch him out to be a starter. We haven't really seen that happen yet. If the ownership comes down, then, I'm not going to complain about gambling on David Price when I've already said I'll be doing it on Matt Manning.
Was that before or after they acquired Max Scherzer?
Before.
Oh, okay. So then that could be part of it too, where maybe there isn't as much need. Tony Gonsolin is going to be your guy that probably going to be the back end of that. But let's look at the Dodgers side here. Patrick Sandoval. We should talk about him. 8.3K. What do you think about him?
Just such a tough matchup for him. I like him as a pitcher, and he's not getting any ownership. He does have the 7th highest top 2 pitcher percentage on the slate. Granted, it's still only 8%. I think that speaks to how bad a lot of the pitching is today. But it's just such a tough matchup here against the Dodgers. You have Mookie Betts back. Justin Turner's back. Chris Taylor's in there. Muncy has just hit the hell out of left-handed pitching, all pitching this year. Corey Seager's back. It's just such a brutal lineup for me to really recommend getting to Sandoval.
All right. And yeah, this Angels lineup is definitely going to be watered down here. Justin Upton, Stassi, probably the 2 guys you want to go to. I refuse to try to make Philip Gosselin a thing. I just refuse. He's going to be batting high in the order. He's 2K.
I'll keep trying to make 2K Joe Adell a thing just because of the power.
I'm going to swear at you again. I got to stop. All right. Dodgers on the other side. There's always a case to go into this team because they are just stupid, talented, 1 through 8, 5 implied runs here. So long as their top stack potential isn't just completely out of whack here, but 3.9% there, 1.7% ownership share, you're not getting them cheap. It is going to be very hard for them to fit into stacks with 6.1K Mookie Betts, Chris Taylor, 5.4K, Justin Turner, 5.2K, and it's not been very good. Max Muncy, Will Smith, Corey Seager, Bellinger, Pollock. Everybody's over 4K here. But does that make them a little bit lower owned and sneaky for you today?
Yeah, it's a tough spot because they're projected for 1 to 2% ownership. And anytime you can roster a team that includes Betts, Taylor, Turner, Muncy, Smith, Seager, Bellinger, Pollock, like anytime you can roster that team at 1 to 2% owned, it's really, really appealing in tournaments because when they hit, they're just going to hit so well and score so many runs. The problem is there's no real case you can make for this being any sort of a good matchup. Patrick Sandoval has struck out almost 28% of hitters this year, 3.5 xFIP, 0.9 home runs per 9. His expected ISO numbers are very good, 119 to righties, 0.088 to lefties. There's nothing you can look at with this guy that says, I like the Dodgers here against Sandoval. So it's purely just, I like the talent on the Dodgers at low ownership, which is fine, but you're also paying for it. It's not like they got any sort of a discount here. So I think they'll be tough to get to. If you manage to get to them and you like the lineup around them, by all means, stacking the Dodgers when they're low owned is never, ever going to be a bad idea. But they're just going to be so hard to get to on a slate with 28 offenses when a lot of them are in good spots.
Any final things to round out this game?
No, I'll be back at 4:45 with Aton, I think.
Yeah, UNA time coming up, 4:45. Yeah, get that 75 minutes in. Thanks so much for everybody sticking with us here today. Jumping streams, playing hopscotch, figuring it all out. But we covered everything. 14 gamer. Adam did a great job going through everything there. Hit that like button, subscribe button, notification bell on the way out. I will be on live before lock with one Terry McBride, my dude, closing it all out, leading you guys up to lock here later today. But until then, best of luck here to you.